What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. The season is over for a lot of you. Some people have, week 17 championships or like the dual championship where it's like 16 and 17, but for the vast majority of you, the season is over. So what I want to do, what I told you I'd do, is I'll go over each of my three teams. Did three teams this year. A lot of people ask me how many teams I play in. I don't like playing in a lot because I've done like 10 teams in a season before. It just gets too many. You have no idea who you're rooting for. You have too many teams to manage. I think three is like a really, really solid number. And it's neat because I did a 10, a 12, and a 14 team league. So we can kind of see basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the draft board for each of the leagues. And then I'll pull up the final roster and we can kind of see how my drafts looked this season, and then a little bit of how they differed in different league sizes, because maybe there's some differences in when I targeted quarterback, when I targeted tight end, so we can kind of see those different things. But what I also want to do is kind of make this a series. So if you want me to go over your team in the coming weeks, the coming months, I set up a new email. It's ffateamreview@gmail.com. I'll just put it in the description so you can just look at that. If you want me to do this, basically just send me a screenshot of your draft and then your final team. If there are any trades you did, I'd really like to know about that. So just write in the email, what trades you did, if you did any. And then any things you kind of want me to go over. Like, do you want me to talk about the draft? What could have been different? Do you want me to talk about, I don't know, how good your team was? Like, whatever you want me to go over, I'll do that. And then, of course, tell me where you finished in the league, because I want to do a mixture of some teams that won the championship, some teams that made the playoffs and maybe didn't make the championship, and then some teams that missed the playoffs entirely. Maybe we go over why that happened. So we'll start off, though, with my three teams. We've got an NFL team, an ESPN team, and a sleeper team, and we will go in order of league size. So this first one is a 10-team league. It is from the 101. And unfortunately, we drafted, and I say we, this one is a co-owned team. And if you guys have not done that before, I highly suggest you do. This is the first year that I co-owned a team with someone, and it's a lot of fun. What we did is, I guess, ideally you'd want to be with the person when you're drafting, but we weren't. So he basically streamed his screen on Twitch, and then we were in a Discord chat. We just talked about the draft. So I just watched, his screen. He could just show me what players are available and stuff like that. So that's a lot of fun. You get to talk over a draft with someone. You get to talk over trades and waiver moves, start-sit decisions. And so I recommend doing so if you've not done so already. But we started off with a very typical build that I saw this season that seemed really, really good, and that you start off grabbing your favorite of McCaffrey and Barkley, and then when you get to that turn in the second and third round, you go after one of Kittle and Kelsey, and then one of Lamar and Mahomes. Now, I believe we had the option of any of those two, so I think Kittle, Kelsey, Mahomes, Lamar were all on the board. We chose to go with the Kelsey-Mahomes stack. Obviously, that worked out better than the other options. We just felt like those two were the best picks. And this was a really, really strong start to drafts, even if it didn't technically work out, since obviously McCaffrey played, 2 games. But as you'll see, it kind of didn't matter. And that's something I kind of want to talk about in this video as well, is we draft the way we do because if you take McCaffrey first overall, and you are counting on him being an absolute monster, and he doesn't play for most of the season, our teams are strong enough that they can survive that. And so we'll go over the rest of this draft. So we start off Christian McCaffrey, Travis Kelce, and Patrick Mahomes. And then we did exactly what we talked about all summer. The wide receivers in the middle rounds were fantastic. So we grabbed Robert Woods, Calvin Ridley, and Terry McLaurin in rounds 4, 5, 6. I guess it could have been better. We didn't draft the perfect receivers in the middle rounds, but we felt that was an area, especially having already taken our quarterback, tight end, and then Christian McCaffrey. I mean, we felt you got to go wide receiver in these middle rounds. And so I think this was a very optimal build this season. We go with Cam Akers in round 7. So then we basically said, all right, we've got tight end, we've got quarterback, and we've got a good chunk of receivers. Now let's hammer out and try and find a running back 2. because maybe Akers takes a while to break out, and maybe Gibson isn't as good as we think, and maybe, Dobbins takes a while to break out, but we figured we'd hit on one of them. And that's all we needed because we had McCaffrey. At least that's what we thought, and then of course McCaffrey gets injured. But we take those three. And actually, we take Moss again. That was basically another, okay, we're saying we don't want to hit on one of these four. And then in the rest of the rounds, we grab another receiver, Brandon Cooks. We grab Chase Edmonds, who I think I took in every single league. And then, unfortunately, Preston Williams, that didn't work out. And then we grab our kicker and our defense in the final 2 rounds. I believe we changed kicker fairly quickly because Zane Gonzalez was not doing that great. This league was weird with defense. Tampa Bay was good in pretty much any format, and so they were good with us. And I think we added the Dolphins defense, so we kind of play in between those two. But this league was weird. I mean, you didn't get negative points for defense until like 28 points allowed, and it was just heavily sacks and just turnovers. So you got like a massive amount of points for every sack and turnover. So a team that allowed 0 points but only had 1 sack barely got you any points, whereas a team that allowed like 25 points and got you 6 sacks got a ton of points. So it was weird. We didn't actually know that going in, but the Bucs would have worked out in pretty much any format. So I thought that was a very strong draft. It's one that we definitely drafted a lot over the summer in just grabbing that stud, if you've got a top 5 pick, that stud running back, getting these wide receivers in the middle rounds, and then whatever is available in these other rounds, just take the value. So how did it work out? This team did end up winning the championship. Did not have a good week. We actually, 131 was one of our lowest totals on the season. So I guess we're lucky that the other team didn't go off. You have the board here as well. And we actually got lucky that the Lions didn't compete because Brady and Fournette basically didn't play in the second half. If they play, we probably lose. We only won by, 10 points? We won by 5 points. Okay, so yeah, we would have lost. But here's the final roster. So we end up acquiring DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor at running back. We keep, of course, our like core, Mahomes, Calvin Ridley, Robert Woods, Kelsey. Like I said, we got a new kicker. We picked up the Dolphins, but I mean, we kept the Buccaneers all season. We still had McLaurin, Gibson, all those guys. But we had a lot of injuries. I mean, we even had players that we had to drop that were injured, but McCaffrey was hurt. McLaurin got hurt towards the end of the season. Gibson was banged up. So we definitely had some injuries. There was no IR spot in this league. But we were also able to pick up DeAndre Swift, pick up Jonathan Taylor, A.J. Brown. And so, I don't know, this was a very, very strong team. Definitely underperformed as we get into this last week. But I don't know, I think that the draft was really strong. I think the team ended up really strong. I would say that it got there because of the core, though. I think the core of Mahomes, Kelsey, and of course McCaffrey that didn't work out was just strong enough to make this a really, really good build in a 10-team league. Because in a 10-team league, this might look like an exceptional roster, but in general, everyone's 8 and 10-team leagues, everyone's got a good team. And so if you play in 8 or 10-team leagues, you got to realize that it's not good enough. Like our running backs were not beating other teams, and we went up against Fournette and Dalvin Cook with DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor. Like I would rather have Fournette and Dalvin Cook. I mean, it ended up to where it was actually like we had 19 and they had 31 points, so I guess they only beat us by 2. But the point is, like, everyone has a good team. Look at the person we played against. Cooper Kupp, Jefferson, Chubb, Darren Waller. Like, everyone's got good running backs, good receivers. And so if there's one position that you can gain a weekly advantage at, it's tight end. And so that's what we talked about this summer was that Kittle and Kelsey, they go way up in draft boards in smaller formats because you have to find an advantage somewhere. So that's the 10-team league. That was the championship team. Unfortunately, it's the only championship. As you'll see, we had some heartbreaks in these other 2 teams. But we'll move on to the 12-team league. This is the only keeper league, and it's only one. So if you can see, this was like the best I could kind of bring up for the draft board. My team is right here, and Miles Sanders was my keeper in the 6th round. So basically, wherever you drafted that player the year before, that's the round you give up to get them, and you can only keep one player. So it was like a fine keeper. I don't think anyone had great ones. I know someone kept McCaffrey in like the second round, but in general, the draft was fairly close to what you would normally do, but it's basically like move everyone up around. So if you see Allen Robinson second round, he was technically the third round pick because most of the first round was just kept, right? So when you get into the first round, I picked, Saquon Barkley, but that was actually the 101. So I actually had the 101 in both leagues. Barkley wasn't kept because he was a first round pick and someone didn't want to go with the first round pick. But that is kind of what we're looking at here. So if you see like Robert Woods fourth round, it's effectively a fifth round pick because a lot of people were already kept. I just want to point that out. So what we have in this draft is we start off with Saquon Barkley. Exact same thing as I talked about before. If you've got a top 5 pick this season, you were drafting a running back, you were trying to get one of these studs, and then you were just hammering out wide receiver. So what did I do? I grabbed Allen Robinson, DJ Moore, Robert Woods, DK Metcalf. And I get to that point, and I'm like, okay, maybe not all these guys work out, but I'm pretty sure 2 or 3 of them are going to. And since I knew I was keeping Miles Sanders in the 6th round, we've got that duo of Barkley and Miles Sanders. We've hammered out wide receivers. I think that's a really strong start. Unfortunately, I do not think I had a very good rest of the draft. Now, I like the ending. I like grabbing Hawkinson in the 13th. Newton in the 12th didn't work out. As we'll see, I got a different quarterback pretty quickly in the season. So that wasn't too bad. But I thought it was a good value at the time, and there were definitely other quarterbacks I could have gotten. I thought in this league, since I've been in this league for a while, I know that not many teams pick extra quarterbacks unless they're put on auto draft, and so I knew there were going to be quarterbacks late, and so I knew I didn't have to take one early. But I'll talk about this in a minute. It might change moving forward. So actually, I'll talk about that now. So we talk a lot about streaming quarterback. It's honestly fantastic because there are so many quarterbacks you can stream. We talk about getting quarterbacks late because, there are just so many good quarterbacks. And when you know you're in a league that there's only going to be about 15 drafted, you can just get a free like 16th or 17th best quarterback that's not that far off from like the 10th best, in the very final round. That's extreme value. But we have seen recently that there are just so many like super elite quarterbacks. So quarterbacks that are posting numbers that we have not seen more than one. Like you look back at years when you have Brady winning the MVP, when you've got the monster seasons from Peyton Manning. Like we've had these spikes, but we've never had a time where like 5 quarterbacks just erupt, right? And so it was very difficult this season to have a dominant team if you didn't have one of like Mahomes, I guess Lamar towards the end of the season, but Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, like there were a number of quarterbacks where they were a massive weekly advantage over people who had, I guess who were playing Burrow and Newton. I guess the quarterbacks that I drafted Burrow in the other league. Quarterbacks like that where it's like you were waiting until the end of the draft. You knew you got a value, but it was still a huge advantage having Kyler Murray over Joe Burrow. So even though you got that advantage in the draft, it was a really big difference. And so we're going to talk about that over the offseason, kind of what we think quarterbacks are going to look like next season. But there's like a top maybe 8 quarterbacks that you're going to want to have on your team, and it's mainly due to that rushing. Like there's a lot of quarterbacks right now that are going to get you like 50, 60 rushing yards a game, and that is such an advantage that we might need to start thinking about quarterback a little bit earlier. And another thing I was kind of thinking of, let's go back to the 10-team league. So we take Mahomes in the 3rd round. And typically, when I'm talking about these like competitive leagues, because all these teams were in money leagues, I don't really play any leagues that aren't money leagues. So when you're playing in these leagues, you're like, okay, I can get value really late. But we're researching so much more than other people, right? Like when you're watching these videos, all these mid and late round picks that have a lot of upside. And so technically, when you're taking your quarterback and your tight end, your defense, your kicker, let's say in those final 4 rounds, yes, you're picking up a lot of value, but you're also not taking a shot on some of these upside players that like you'll see in the sleeper league I bring up, when I drafted, I like hit really, really good in the later rounds there. You're kind of foregoing that if you're taking a bunch of those other players. And I don't know, like I think we can build a really strong team. Like imagine we turned Kelsey and Mahomes into, I don't know, Hawkinson and who was like a late round quarterback this season? Maybe like a Tannehill? I guess like a Hawkinson and a Tannehill. And maybe you replace these two with running backs and wide receivers. But then you kind of go to the middle rounds and it's like, well, we still got Woods, Ridley, McLaurin, Brandon Cooks. Like, what more do you want from your wide receiver? Like, do you really need to spend that second and third round pick on receiver when there were such good options in the middle rounds? And we look at running back and it's like we got McCaffrey, we got Gibson, we got Dobbins. We ended up acquiring Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift. Like, did we really need the second and the third round for running back? And so when you look at it, it's like, what are you going to do if you didn't have Kelsey this season? Like, it was Kelsey, it was Kittle for a while, it was Waller, and then it was like a chasm. Like, there was just nothing. And so that weekly advantage that Kelsey brings, it's like, I think Kelsey's going to be maybe a top 10 pick next season, and probably Kittle as well, because people realize that. They're like, there's so much depth at wide receiver. There's a lot of really good quarterbacks, but this wide receiver depth, we can grab other running backs at different spots. Like, when else can you get Kelsey and Kittle? Like, there's such an advantage. And so that was something that we kind of found out this season, was that we maybe can afford to take these quarterbacks and tight ends a little bit earlier because we know they're going to hit. You know, there's a very low bust rate for these positions, and we're pretty good at drafting the rest of the draft. So why not figure out wide receiver and running back a little bit later and grab these other guys? So it's just a thought that I had. But anyways, that was a little tangent that I had. But I went over the beginning of this draft. It was Barkley, then we grabbed Robinson, Moore, Wood, and Metcalf, and then Sanders. So I thought that the first 6 rounds were excellent. Grab Marquise Brown. I thought, honestly, he was going to have an exceptional season. He did not. He had a really bad season. But I don't know. I really thought that Lamar was going to improve as a passer, and it seems like he regressed as a passer. So that's something we'll definitely need to observe in the offseason. Is Lamar's awesome for fantasy. And he's a really, really like good quarterback for the Ravens and how they want to run things. But for his receiving weapons, I mean, he's just not accurate. And he's not going to throw the ball very much. And so you're going to have spiked weeks from Brown, but apparently not as many as we thought. And he's going to be very inconsistent. And so it's something we need to think about. Then I screwed up. So I think my thought process in these next few rounds, because it was a while ago, I don't remember what I was thinking exactly, but I think my thought was, I've got Barkley and Miles Sanders, and I'm pretty sure they're going to do well. So let me just grab like James White and Duke Johnson, because White is going to catch passes, and if I need a fill-in, I don't think I'll need him very often, but if I need a fill-in, I can use him to get a few points. And since I figured that this league has 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, and so I kind of figured my wide receivers would be filling up those wide receiver and flex spots. And so then this would only be for running back 2, and I could get by with James White running back 2. But I think I failed to realize that Newton, there was definitely a risk that he wasn't good. He was definitely not going to dump off as much, and he was going to take a lot of touchdowns running. And so like James White was just not a good pick. So that was a bad pick. And then Duke Johnson, I don't think that was a horrible pick, because that was basically just saying, I think Duke will be really good if David Johnson goes down. But we basically realized that Duke was not good when David Johnson went down. And you are still assuming a handcuff in like the 9th, effectively 10th round. So that probably wasn't a great pick either. So I don't love those picks. We get to Chase Edmonds. I think I said I took Edmonds in like every league. I thought Edmonds was a great pick this season. It didn't fully work out because Drake missed some time, but like some of that time was in a bye week. And so you didn't get the bye week. You only got 1 week from Edmonds. He didn't do that well. He still like outperformed his ADP, but it was like you were never really starting him, so didn't end up being a fantastic pick. But I think from a process standpoint, that was a good pick. Boston Scott, I was just handcuffing my running back. I basically said, when Sanders goes down, I'll just start Scott, and then I'll have Scott and Barkley. That'll be fine. I didn't account for Barkley going down. That was unfortunate. And then, of course, remember I said I took Newton. I thought the rushing upside was great, but I don't know. He really regressed after he got COVID. So I don't know if that had part to do with it, but he was not great. And as you'll see when I show you the team, I ended up dropping him. And then Hawkinson, thought that was a good value. And then, of course, just took the Colts D. There's no kicker in this league. Thank goodness. I hate playing in leagues with kickers. And then Laviska, I just thought he was a nice upside play. Probably could have gone with someone else, but I don't know. I thought Laviska was a fine pick. So this is the championship. So this team ended up in second place. As you'll see, we added Jalen Hurts and we got Josh Allen. Goodness, maybe after like a month, maybe in like week 4, week 5, we got him. We ended up getting Josh Allen off free agency because there was a team that just took too many quarterbacks and all of their quarterbacks hit. I think they drafted like Dak, Russell Wilson, and Josh Allen, and every single one of them hit. But it was like they should have traded, absolutely should have traded. But they ended up having to drop one, and it was Josh Allen, and I put the biggest bid in for him. So I got Josh Allen, got Jalen Hurts at the end. This was actually, I think twice maybe I started Hurts. I feel like maybe it was in like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then I started him this last week. It didn't ultimately end up helping me, but I would have lost anyways because he ended up benching his defense who got him points. I would have lost anyways, but yeah, I guess Josh Allen and Hurts were definitely good quarterbacks to have. As you can see, we ended up getting Dobbins to fill in at running back. And everything worked out how I was kind of planning it to work out. And we kept Hawkinson. We had all 4 of these wide receivers starting. I cycled through different defenses throughout the season. I don't even remember who I said I drafted, but kind of switched that up a little bit. We had, the Dolphins, we were kind of switching in and out. Marquise Brown, I think I put him in the IR off of like the COVID list. I don't even remember how that happened, but he goes there. We ended up picking up Chase Claypool. We picked it up Salvin Ahmed. Chase Edmonds still there. And then I picked up Dallas Goedert after he was injured because it just like, I mean, you look at this, right? So TJ Hawkinson ends up as the 4, right? Like the the tight end 4 in the season. But there's nothing here. I mean, 13.5, was that his max points? He was typically getting you between like 8 and 10 fantasy points, and that's the tight end 4. So it just reiterates like the weekly advantage of having this season. It was one of the big 3 while Kittle was injured, of Waller, Kittle, and Kelsey. Such a weekly advantage over everyone else that you just got to throw everything else out and get those guys on your roster. So I thought maybe Goddard would be good when he returned, but nothing. There was just nothing outside of those guys. So what else I want to talk about? 6 and 7. This team started off 3-7. 3-7 ends up getting second place. So don't ever think you're out of it. I mean, I drafted Cam Newton and Saquon Barkley. Ended up having to drop Saquon Barkley. So that was my first overall pick I had to drop. I had to drop the quarterback that I thought was going to be a decent part of my team. We had Miles Sanders was injured for a large portion of the season. And so I looked at that team at 3-7. I thought there was no chance I made the playoffs, no chance I won the Super Bowl. But I did look at it and I said, okay, if I went out, I was still putting up like a lot of points. So I figured I could probably get in on a tiebreaker. And that's what happened. I won out the final 3 weeks. I got in on the points tiebreaker, actually on the J.K. Dobbins touchdown, put me over the edge on the points. And then I think I pretty handily won the first 2 matchups in the playoffs. I don't remember what the score was. I don't think it was like super close. Because the team performed really, really well to close the season. I mean, having this core of Metcalf and Allen Robinson was really strong, not in the final week, but they were really strong. Woods was pretty strong for most of the season. And so it was a really good team, but I definitely should not have won the championship. And another thing I want to note, I was playing the team that had McCaffrey. So it was a keeper, but he still, I mean, he had to spend, it was the first pick in the second round, I believe, to get him. And so, like, we look back at my first team, won the championship drafting McCaffrey. We look at the second team, second place, drafting Barkley. We look at this team I lost to, first place, drafting McCaffrey. So don't think that if you just lose your first or second round pick, you're just toast. If you make a strong draft, you can easily make the playoffs and win the championship, even losing a stud player. And that's why we draft such deep teams. It's why we make sure we have upside. We make sure we plan for that. When we're drafting, we basically need to tell ourselves, hey, I'm headlining this team with McCaffrey. I'm going to build in a way where he's a cornerstone. But I also need to build in a way that I can still win if he gets hurt. And when you're building teams like that, you're going to succeed because it's going to be a good team even if he gets hurt. And then if he doesn't get hurt, you have a monster on your hands. So Neither team worked out how I wanted them to work out with the headlining running backs, but they still did really nicely. The final team is a 14-team league. Oh, and this one's full PPR. The first two teams were half PPR. This one is full PPR. So I had the 101 in both of the other leagues, and then I have the 113 in this one. So we start off the draft alternating. I did not have a plan at 13 here to be like, I'm definitely going running back and wide receiver. I think there is so much that could change on where people are drafting once you get to this like 13th pick that you kind of have to go value based. I don't think you should just jam in a strategy. Would it have worked if I took Tyreek and Adams? Absolutely. But I think it still worked out, starting with Miles Sanders, grabbing Devonta Adams. We wrap back around in the late third round. We get Jonathan Taylor, Robert Woods. Next round, we get Gibson and Will Fuller. And so I was basically just saying, this is a league, again, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex spots. So I was just saying, I don't know for sure each week if I'm going to start a bunch of wide receivers or running backs. I'm probably going to draft this position, and I'm just going to alternate. I'm going to build them evenly, and we'll figure everything else out at the end. I think that is an exceptional start to a draft. Miles Sanders, Jonathan Taylor, Antonio Gibson, and then Adams, Robert Woods, and Will Fuller. I think that brought a lot of upside, a lot of floor. Very proud of that start. Maybe I need to focus on like the middle rounds more, because it seems like I always have this exceptional first 6 rounds, and then things maybe start to fall apart after that. I think this is still a really good draft, but in the 7th round pick, Tariq Cohen, I know I got sniped on Deontay Johnson. I wanted to take him. I think my rationale was, I'm good at my running backs. This is a full PPR league. It's a 14-team league. If I suffer injuries, I want someone I can put in that second flex spot that I can just be like, hey, they're probably going to get me like 10 points. Because if Tariq Cohen stays healthy this season, he's probably getting you like 10 points a game in PPR because he's getting those receptions. I think that's what my rationale was. And if you look at the running backs after, I knew I was going to take Chase Edmonds next. It was like Breida, Damian Harris like worked out, but not really in a full PPR league. Madison, Scott, Coleman, Carry-On, Bryce Love. Like, you were just taking handcuffs at this point. So I figured this was like the last running back, at least this is in my mind, this is what I figured. Last running back that you can really trust to get you points, and so that's probably why I took him. Another guy, I take Chase Edmonds, another league liked him this season. We took Jalen Reagor at wide receiver. That pick didn't work out, but I think it was like a solid pick just from like a process standpoint. I think that I thought that Carson Wentz was going to be better this season. I thought that offense was going to be better. And I think that Reagor is a very talented receiver who's going to have a good season if Hurts can remain the quarterback. So I take Reagor there. I take Brandon Ayuk in the next round, so that ended up being a good pick. Took Gesicki in the 11th. I don't have a problem with that one. That was basically like the best available tight end at that point. Joshua Kelly did not work out. I ended up trading him away, actually. That was a really good trade. We'll go over. And then I grabbed James Robinson in the 13th, Joe Burrow in the 14th, Titans defense, so I'm pretty sure I dropped after like week 1, and then Chase Claypool in the 16th round. So this is another thing I kind of was talking about earlier, was that we had all these weapons that we really liked. I love T. Higgins as well. I ended up picking him up off free agency, but there were so many rookie wide receivers, rookie running backs that we were like, these guys are going to be so good that maybe the best strategy is don't make that Joe Burrow pick at 14, take T. Higgins at 14, and just replace one of those mid-round picks or early picks with a better quarterback that's going to give you a weekly advantage. Joe Burrow worked out for a while, and then he got hurt. You can't predict that sort of injury. So I don't think it was a bad pick, but maybe looking back, we kind of say we're very strong at drafting. We're going to draft good players late. Don't spend a late round pick on a quarterback. Maybe let's secure that stud quarterback early. I don't know. It's something I still need to think about. Maybe we can kind of go over that when you guys send me your teams as well. Trades. So that was the first trade is right here. My first trade is saying I need that upgraded quarterback. I looked at my team. My team actually started off poorly. I think I was like 1-3. But I was always like leading the league in points scored. It was a very frustrating start. I think I may have started like 2-4, maybe like 3-5 at one point, and then I just like won out. But I started off, I was like leading the league in points scored, and I think I was 1-3. So it stinks, but you're always in it because all you need to do is make the playoffs. You don't need to get the number one seed. You just got to make the playoffs. But I looked at my team and I said, why am I losing some of these games? It was basically my projection was always around like 120, which was very close to what other teams were. And I wanted my projection to be closer to 130, 140 every week. So I said, how do I do that? It's Patrick Mahomes. I found a team that I thought would trade me Patrick Mahomes. And so I traded away my quarterback, Carson Wentz. I traded away Robert Woods. And then this was in that time frame when we had that news about Melvin Gordon, that maybe he's going to be suspended for like the DUI. And so we were like, ooh, maybe Philip Lindsay is going to be a good asset. So I traded him away at that high price tag. And then Joshua Kelly, this was also when Eckler had just gone down. And so we were thinking maybe Joshua Kelly steps in. So I used both of those bits of news. Plus Woods is just a good player. That's a good guy to add in the trade. And my quarterback, and I said, I'll give you all of this, Patrick Mahomes. Always want to do that. Then later in the season, I said, I need another upgrade. I need to increase wide receiver. I had T. Higgins, I had Fuller, I had Devonta Adams. I thought that was good. I said, can I condense Will Fuller and T. Higgins into one player that's going to give me another weekly advantage? I said that player is DeAndre Hopkins, just because of the team that was trying to trade away DeAndre Hopkins. And so I said, if I can pair, Hopkins and Adams, that's really good. Hopkins did fall off a little bit at times towards the end of the season, but he actually definitely helped me in the semifinals get to the championship. That was actually the only trade that I ended up doing. So we'll exit from here, and we will go to... So I'm going to show you my team here, then I'll show you the championship matchup. Sleeper, I don't know, maybe I'm just doing it wrong, but they don't have a great screen that you can kind of look at like your team and the matchups. It's really good on the app. It's not so great on desktop. So this is the final team. A lot of these starters were what we had when we started, but then we had injuries, and that was really unfortunate to end the season. So we still had, we have Mahomes, we have at running back Miles Sanders, Jonathan Taylor. That's how we started off the draft. Devonta Adams and Hopkins. We traded for Hopkins. Irv Smith, because Gesicki was like banged up, and I didn't really know if he was going to play. And I don't know, I thought Irv Smith was a really good play last week. We had Brandon Ayuk and Le'Veon Bell get us 9 points, which just killed the roster. Ayuk was getting us 20 points per game leading up to that, but then, of course, he gets hurt. Le'Veon Bell, the only reason I was starting Bell was because we were relying on James Robinson every week. He gets hurt. We were relying on Antonio Gibson every week. He gets hurt. I didn't know how healthy he was going to be. And so we basically didn't have an option because in a 14-team league, the free agency is thin. Like, there was no one I was picking up off free agency other than Bell. And then, of course, Bell has the bad game. And then Rams, I don't know. It was just the Rams defense. So it did not work out, unfortunately. I'll go to the matchup. We still scored 150, but if we look at our final month of the season, that was basically the floor of this team. I mean, we were consistently getting in that 175, close to 200 range. If I started the correct defense one week, it would have been 210 points. And I just think it was a really, really strong team because there were no weak points. Maybe you could say tight end, but streaming Irv Smith and Gesicki still kind of got it done for us. But I mean, having this duo of Adams and Hopkins was really, really nice. Hitting on Sanders, Jonathan Taylor, Gibson, James Robinson in a 14-team league was such a weekly advantage that once we added Mahomes, the projection every week was 150. And so when you're at a 30-point projection every week, you're going to be dominating. We end up losing to Dare, unfortunately. Note on Sam Darnold, you see there. So the people who played him in the, I guess you'd say, quarterfinals, semifinals, noticed that he had Carson Wentz. And free agency obviously is thin in a 14-team league. And so they added all the quarterbacks. He ends up getting Sam Darnold, but that's why he had Sam Darnold, is he had Carson Wentz. I think he had a different quarterback the week before. I think Brandon Allen he started the week before, and I guess he probably should have just kept starting Brandon Allen because apparently he's good at fantasy. I don't know. But he was streaming different quarterbacks. Finley? Was it Finley? I don't even remember. He was starting scrubs, but they were still getting it done. His team was strong as well. Didn't start off strong because Chubb gets hurt. Took Montgomery a while to get started. Crowder gets hurt. Ridley obviously was consistent. Eckler gets hurt. But Yeah, it was Diggs. It was Diggs basically offsetting Devonta Adams, so those were just the 1-for-1. And then other than that, it was fairly even. But the big difference was just Ayuk. Ayuk and Le'Veon Bell just absolutely tanked in the final week. Definitely would have preferred James Robinson and Gibson to stay healthy. But yeah, that's basically how that team came about. Was that I looked at like 120-point projection every week, and I was like, this is not enough to assure myself playoffs and like championship appearance. I need to make a move. And so I made the moves to take my depth. And this is what we talked about every single week this season. Take your depth. I had a ton of depth in this league. I had people who were on the bench. I had like Claypool, T. Higgins, and Ayuk all on the bench for a while. And I was like, I got to be starting these guys. Claypool obviously fell off, but I was like, I need to be starting these people. How do I do that? Trade away my starters. Combine my starters into an even better starter, and then bring my bench into the starting lineup. That's how you increase your projection from like 120 every week into the 130, 140, 150 range. So that, I think, is going to do it for this video. Those are all the teams. And of course, I said I lost to Darren in the championship. So we have a first place and then 2 second place finishes this season. A very disappointing final week. Of course, we do get the 1 win. It would have been very disappointing if we got second in every league. But I mean, obviously, I'll take it. I'll take a championship appearance in every league. But disappointing that we couldn't get more victories. A few injuries kind of hurt us. But I think the teams were very, very strong. And I would imagine that you guys drafted very similarly to what I had. And then it's just taking that team that you drafted, figuring out what it'll take to increase your projection every week. Where are you a little bit weak that you need to upgrade? And then just making smart moves and trying to develop a championship roster. If you want me, again, to go over your team, it's FFA, oh goodness, it's in the description. It's like FFAteamreview@gmail.com. If you screen cap your team, it can be your team or the matchup. It doesn't really matter. I guess it kind of depends on the site you're using, which is just easiest to show us. But screen cap that, screen cap your draft. It can be the total draft or just your team. I feel like your team is probably better just because it would be like a lot of different images rolling through the draft. Unless you're on Sleeper. If you're on Sleeper, just show us the whole draft board because they have a really nice setup. But these other 2 sites, ESPN and NFL, they weren't good visually. Send us that and then send over what your moves were for trades. I don't care about waivers. What your trades were and like how you got to your final team maybe, and any notes, anything that you want me to go over. But that, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.